Greetings, gents, and welcome to part 6 of my analysis on the movie Fight Club, with a word of thanks to all of you who have hung in for every segment, urging me to take the time to do this right. As we left off last time, we were just starting to examine the dual-edged sword that is Tyler Durden, as represented in the life of the narrator. On the positive side, the narrator has hardened in a decidedly good way. No longer bouncing around like a pinball, pushed to and fro by the unseen forces in his life, he has begun to take charge, throwing off the weight of social expectation and convention. His insomnia? Gone. His anxiety? Gone. His obsequious ways? Gone. All of it sloughed off like worn-out clothing as an improved version of himself emerges under the tutelage of his alter ego. He is stymied, however, where it concerns his sexual and emotional isolation. His weekly fights, while toughening him physically and even helping him fit the mold of a leader in Fight Club, have not created the spark needed for him to deal with his attraction to Marla. Oh, and there's the other thing. Whatever good has emerged in the narrator, whatever strength, we also have to acknowledge that he still suffers from a worsening split in his personality. And the alter ego that has emerged in the form of Tyler Durden isn't a self-improvement guru. Tyler Durden is more like Tony Soprano than Tony Robbins. And that leads us to consider the pathological duality at play here. The more the narrator takes control of his life, the more Tyler Durden takes control of the narrator. And in this, Tyler has revealed himself as the narrator's anima, his toxically feminine side, pummeling him with the message of his disposability, of his utter worthlessness unless he is doing Tyler's bidding. And even then, the devaluing continues, true to the feminine archetype. By the way, one commenter opined that he thought that Tyler was still putting the narrator on a red pill path, the logic being that his struggles were now against the things that enslaved him, consumerism, and life on the white-collar plantation. To be honest, that is a thought that crossed my mind more than once, though I ultimately had to rule it out. True enough, Tyler is not conditioning the narrator to be disposable for the sake of women, for work, or in patriotic fervor. But alas, disposability doesn't have a high road, except in the rationalized thinking of those who believe that a bit of metal and a ribbon are worth a man's life. Once the mindset has congealed to equate death and heroics, the reason employed is a distinction without a difference. And we will see this illustrated graphically as the story moves forward. We begin with Tyler's first speech to the members of Fight Club, which he gives in the basement of a bar where they have been meeting to fight. In this speech, he taps into frustrations familiar to many men. Looking around the room of men, he says, "I see all this potential, and I see it squandered. God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, working tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so that we can buy shit that we don't need. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. And we are slowly learning that fact, and we are very, very pissed off." I enjoyed this scene, not because of any earth-shattering revelation of hidden truth, but because it aptly reveals the time-tested techniques of demagogues and cultists. It does it so smoothly that the first few times I watched the movie, I found myself cheering Tyler on. But the closer look is telling. In this scene, Tyler describes something superficially plausible. That something is, in fact, missing from the lives of men. That in having tamed the environment, conquered the elements, created stable governments and safe, comfortable places to live, men have also created a hole in their existence. I've said as much myself in my work over the years, that men have been so good at what they do that they've worked themselves out of a job in many ways. In most instances, there are no more dragons to slay. No need to stand at the entrance to the cave ready for the beast. The beasts, along with all our new frontiers, have been tamed or destroyed. And we've been left to fester, trapped in the old mandate of protecting anyone but ourselves, but with no real enemy to battle and no one worth saving if we did. Tyler's demagoguery gives the men of Fight Club a solution to that dilemma by creating the needed enemy, by taking the failings of men and reshaping them into an external boogeyman, at which, in the words of Tyler Durden, they are very, very pissed off. This is a point we are well advised not to overlook. Red pill philosophy, at least as I understand it, reduced to its core wisdom, informs us that the enemy, the real enemy, is within. It's not women that get us, it's our naivete and mindless attachment to them. It's not gynocentrism, it's our willingness to enslave ourselves by making sacrosanct its crazy dictates. It's not consumerism, it's our undeveloped values and our attachment to things, our worship of objects and the imagined status they bring. That's the beauty of red pill philosophy. It doesn't require the world to change for us to reap the benefits. If we want to erase the impact of consumerism on our lives, the only thing we need to destroy is our credit cards. Not Walmart, not IKEA, not Starbucks, but the part of ourselves that is foolish enough to believe and think those things are important. Red pill men don't seek to destroy marriage. They just quit participating in it. Our reaction to the stupidity of marriage is a strike, not a war. Red pill men place the onus for change where it belongs, on ourselves. That is the freedom. It's the only answer that was ever needed, but it is in no way what Tyler Durden wants the men of Fight Club to see. And the reason for that is simple. It's because you can't control free men. And you can't make them destroy themselves or anything else for a cause, especially causes that are nothing more than projections of their own failings. That's the way of feminism and other ideologies of victimhood. It's also the way of Tyler Durden, and we see this much more graphically illustrated ahead as he puts the men of Fight Club onto a path of devaluation and self-destruction. Tyler sets an example of sacrificial disposability for the men by getting a mobster type named Lou to beat him savagely over using the basement of the bar for fights. Then he informs the men that they all have the assignment to go out and instigate fights, with the understanding that they must lose. The narrator takes this lesson to heart and next quits his job in a scene that makes Lester Burnham's quit scene in American Beauty seem like it was phoned in. Not straying a bit from Tyler's message, the narrator beats the fuck out of himself when he quits to give him a bigger edge in extorting money from his boss. And this is where we see Tyler Durden going into his agenda full swing. He begins to issue the men of Fight Club regular assignments to go out and cause destruction. They attack the trappings of consumer culture, defacing advertising, reversing traffic spikes at parking garages and malls, randomly smashing headlights on cars. It escalates to firebombing. The Fight Club, under Tyler's direction, is lashing back at the society that has wronged them, with about as much credibility as feminists wielding their imaginary, patriarchy-smashing hammers. This is Tyler Durden's Snowflake Brigade, hidden behind a mask of superficial toughness, and in the words of Tyler himself, I remind you once again, they are very, very pissed off. And about what? Because the TV set promised them they would be millionaires and movie stars, but they ended up waiting tables and working in gas stations. This is the great motivator, driving Tyler to lash out at the world and to encourage others to do the same. And it ranks up there with 1 million women putting on stupid pink knit pussy hats and wailing at the world that an election didn't go their way. In this respect, Tyler Durden is about as red pill as Steve Shives. There is, of course, a deeply fatal flaw in the narratives that resulted in such a ridiculous turn in the storyline. That is, the storyline was twisted off into a ditch by the ignorance and the misandry of the movie makers. Indeed, I'm sure to them that men going postal on the world because they fell short of being rich and famous or some other equally petty reason seems plausible. And it may well be plausible to some degree in the narcissistic realm of Hollywood, the land of entitled brats. There is no other way to see it, in my not-so-humble opinion. Tyler's first speech and the resultant violence it inspires is one of 2 major flaws in the story that ruin its potential as a red pill film. If the men of Fight Club were firebombing family courts, ransacking police stations, and running politicians through medieval gauntlets, I'd be a little more impressed, and it would have been a lot more consistent with the actual source of their anger as described in the story. We learned about that anger early in the movie when we discovered that the narrator, who is the template for the men in Fight Club, was robbed of his father and raised by his mother in an emotional shithole. Rather than seize that information and allow it to guide the narrative, we just get a sick psychodrama painting men who are indulging in Michael Kimmel's aggrieved entitlement. Gents, this shit is straight out of the feminist playbook on toxic masculinity. Mind you, we are tossed a couple of red herrings to try to distract us from that. One is when Tyler forces a convenience store clerk into an alley at gunpoint. Questioning him about his ambitions, he hears that the man wanted to be a veterinarian but dropped out of school. Tyler sends him off with the message that if he is not on his way to being a veterinarian within 6 weeks, that he will hunt him down and kill him. And this is where I've seen in the comments here and other places that Tyler reveals the true nature of his objectives, to direct men to facing failings and pursuing their dreams. That Tyler is an agent not of control and abuse, but of self-actualization. I'd suggest, however, that considering the big picture and the closer look, all we are seeing in this scene from Tyler is standard blue pill mental masturbation. It's a preening alpha, doing his best to distract us from distilling his actions down to their core meaning, which can be summed up as easily as saying, "Do what I say, or I'll kill you." I'll explore this and a lot more in the next and final installment of my analysis of the movie Fight Club. But at this point, I think it's a good idea to zoom the lens out from all the minutiae of the blow-by-blow account and look for just a moment at the bigger picture. Fight Club is in essence a study of a human being's relationship with his shadow. Knowing the shadow, being cognizant of its characteristics, and being able to draw on the parts that are useful and strengthening is the lifelong challenge, as is doing so without allowing the shadow to run rampant. The lesson of this movie isn't to provide a qualitative comparison between the narrator and Tyler. It's not to force us to choose which one of these two to root for. The lesson is to understand the folly of either allowing your shadow full control or denying it any control, especially if you deny it any control by denying it exists. Following that path resulted in the narrator's life devolving into a pit of neurosis and personal misery. It created a vast, empty hole that only Tyler Durden could fill. And allowing that to happen, allowing the narrator to confuse Tyler for a savior, breaks a lot more than it fixes. And this is it for part 6 of the Fight Club analysis. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.